Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video I'll show you how I painted my rogue idol that I'll be using in Age of Sigmar and Moonstone. And here you can see the model, how I made it. I made it out of insulation foam, and that video's on the channel if you'd like to check it out. But let's get started painting this boy up, and I'll go through all the stages showing you exactly how I did it. And here he is then. This is the piece all put together with the foam, and the first step is to seal this foam in. If you use a spray can, you're going to melt that foam. So I chose to use some PVA glue, and I mixed in a little bit of just cheap Hobby World paint, which is acrylic black paint, and that'll give us a nice dark grey. So it's a bit like Mod Podge this, but it'll be a little bit cheaper, and so it'll save you a little bit of money. When I make my big terrain pieces, I use garage floor paint, which is a bit of a smelly process, but it seals it in really well. And you could certainly do that for this kind of model. But I thought I'd go old school and use the PVA. And here you can see I've given it 2 coats now, left it dry overnight between each coat, and then this is what you're left with. So this is well sealed in. Now you could spray over it if you wanted to, and you can certainly use a range of different paints over the top. And at the bottom I just glued in some coins. That really adds that extra weight, and now it's not top heavy at all. It's going to be really sturdy on the table. Right, let's start with the painting. The first paint is a layer Dawnstone, and I've got this Army Painter vehicle brush. This is going to be great for dry brushing, and so I just get some on my bristles, work it in there so they're all well covered, and just use a little bit of cardboard and try and get as much of the paint off that card as I can, and then I can start dry brushing the model. And so I'm just going all over, mostly downward strokes. Sometimes I go around in circles, back and forth. I want to try and keep some of the shade and the shadow on this with that dark grey that I used as the primer with that PVA. But overall, I just want to bring out all the texture from all the little cuts and grooves and all the different angles that I've created when I made it. And there you can see, just with one coat, it's already bringing this guy to life and highlighting those edges. I just continued that all over the model until it was completely covered, leaving the base of the legs a little bit darker, not dry brushing so heavy there. Next I took some layer Administratum Grey, it's a little bit lighter, and so now I'm just going to go over the higher parts, the areas that I think would catch the sun the most. And if you want to find out any of these paints or get hold of them, I'll put some links down below to Element Games where you can save up to 20%. I'll get a small commission too, so you're helping me to make these videos, so thanks so much for that. But here we go, we've gone over that now, all completely dry brushed. It's really brought out those raised areas a bit more, so it's time to add a little bit of colour. And so I'm going to use some contrast paints now, starting with Dark Oath Flesh. And I'm going to pick out the odd rock on this guy and just give it a nice coat of this paint. Now it's going to be very subtle when it dries, so it goes on a little bit brighter, but by the time it dries you're hardly going to notice. It's going to be a very subtle effect, but I think it's well worth doing it. You could just stop at dry brushing the rocks in grey, but I think adding these different colours and spacing them out evenly throughout the model is a nice way to go. And next I chose to use Contrast Space Wolves Grey. It's a nice blue colour to it, as you can see here, but when it dries, it's going to be more of a grey colour, just with a tint of blue. And so I'm going out there, spacing the rocks. I don't want to put 2 rocks next to each other in too many places of the same colour. So I'm just eyeing it up and having a look where I think it would look nice and spacing that out. Picking out some of the bigger rocks too, and again, don't worry about this being too bright. Next up, it's Contrast Plague Bearer Flesh. Nice dirty green now. This is going to be great for some of those rocks. Again, just spacing it. I'm not doing as many of the green, so I'm just picking out little areas and giving it a nice coat. I'm not flooding it either with paint here, not putting too much on my brush, just enough. Next up, Contrast Skeleton Horde. This is a very subtle effect, so I can use this on some of the bigger rocks. As you can see here, there's a big one on the back, and I'll start picking out some of the larger rocks. You're hardly going to notice it, but it does break up that grey in the finished piece, as you'll see later on. And here's a really big one down by his ankle and his foot. Let's give that a coat. And there you can see it's still a little bit wet. I'm going to let that completely dry before we move on to any of the further stages now. As it was drying, I felt it needed a little bit more red in there, so I picked out this Carroburg Crimson. I'm just going to go over the reddy brown colour that I painted earlier on and just give some of them a nice coat of this. Again, this will be subtle too. It looks quite bright there, but when it dries, it certainly won't be that bright. So I'm just picking out just a few, not all of the brown ones I did, just some of them. Now on to Contrast Cygor Brown, and this is going to help just to make those shadows a little bit richer. So I'm just going down his bum crack there, give that a coat, and then pick out some of the chunkier gaps and just fill those in. I'm looking for the ones at the underside mostly, but just having a look. And then that's really going to make the rocks stand out a little bit. We've got a few other things to do to this later on, so you're really not going to see an awful lot of this, but it is going to have a nice effect. So everything about this model is quite subtle really, which is odd because he's a big chunky beast. But for now we have done all the colours, so it's time to just do a little bit more dry brushing just to bring everything together. So I've chosen this layer Pallid Witch Flesh, and this is going to give us a nice highlight now, and it should tie everything in. And just be careful, I put a little bit too much on my brush here, so a little bit too much came off. And you can wipe it off if you're quick and get rid of most of it, but just be careful. We really want to work it into that cardboard as I showed you earlier on. But here now I'm going all over the model, and it is going to look perhaps a little bit chalky, a little bit bright as well at this stage. But again, once it all dries and it settles down after a few hours, that'll come down a little bit, won't be quite as bright. And you are going to be a few feet away from the model when it's on the tabletop as well. So having that extra highlight is actually going to help sell the effect of it as a model. Next, we're going to go for a little bit brighter now with Corax White. This is a base paint, and I'm going to be careful here just to catch the very most raised areas, the areas that would catch most of the light. And so just pick those out and just give them a gentle dry brush all over. Get the tips of the toes, the fists, all the tops of the arms. And I'm going down in mostly downward strokes here to catch them. Now it's time to get technical with some Tesseract Glow, and this is going to get the eyes and bring it to life. So I'm going in there, being quite generous, really filling inside the eye, and also just using the brush to get a little bit around the rim of the eye there as well, which will catch that white that we painted on, and that'll start to give a glowing effect. I wasn't quite happy with this though, so I let it dry, and then I went back with a dry brush, put a bit more of the Corax White on there, and then I just made that kind of around the edge a bit more to give more of a glowing effect. So do that on each eye, flick it out a bit, and gently just dust around with that little brush, just giving it little flicks here and there just to really break it up and make it so it's not a complete circle. Then back to the Tesseract Glow technical paint, and then I'm going to go and just dot paint all over that. I don't want a completely neat circle, I want it to be random, and so I was much happier with that. Now I want to add some grass in amongst some of the cracks. So I'm going to start with some Vallejo thick mud. I love this stuff. And here I've got some static grass. This is going to be great to give it some texture. That's going to work really nicely. And then I've just got some flocking as well. That'll just add some nice colour and texture. So the first step is to get a little tool and then just add some of this thick mud in some of the bigger gaps and then work it down in amongst the little crevices there. Once you've got some down, get some of your static grass and just dot it on. Don't press it down. Always grab a bunch and just touch it to the mud and then flick in a little bit and sprinkle on some of the just normal flocking then and fill in the gaps so you're covering all the mud. Tip it upside down. Give it a tap, and then if you blow it, you can make all that static grass stand up, and then that should really add some texture to this model. And I just continue with that process until I'm happy that I've got it all over the model in all the right places, and it looks kind of natural, it doesn't look like it's too much. So this is really just you using your eye to get a nice balance. And that is the model completely finished. He's all painted now. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to have to do the base, but I'll do that maybe in a later video just to show you a nice way to do a moorland basing technique. But as far as the model goes, I'm really happy. You can see the highlights are toned down a bit now. Those colours aren't too strong. And then using all the different grasses really brings it together and sells the idea that this is some rock beast that has come to life. It was really fun putting all these grasses on. You could even add a few little shrubs, which I might go back to and do later on perhaps. But I'm going to do the base first. And the idea with this is I want to tie it in with some of the themed terrain. I've done like the giant rogue idol terrain set that I made for Age of Sigmar. So I'm going to do the base very similar to that. Spend a bit more time on it though. Get it a bit more detailed. So I'll do a separate video later on for that. But if you'd like to see how I built and painted my rogue idol terrain set, then there are some videos on the channel. I'll link to this one at the end of the video. And I'll also link to the video on how I made this rogue idol here that you saw in this video. You know, if you wanted to give it a go, I'd go through step by step exactly how I did it. A massive thank you to all my sponsors and supporters, and look out for the Moonstone series that I've been doing on the channel recently. I've been having a great time with that game, and also the links are down below so you can make some savings on all your paints with Element Games and also my friendly local game store, the Little Shop DVD and Games in Liskeard. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. This was a great fun little project to do. It cost hardly anything. The model itself was less than £1. The base was the most expensive thing. I think it was £3 altogether. So very cheap, nice way to get hold of this model. And of course it's for personal use, so I won't be selling it or anything like that. But it certainly was a fun project, and I hope you've enjoyed seeing how it was put together, and maybe you'll give it a go too. So I'd love to see any photos if you do. I'll put a link down below to my Facebook page and group where you can share things like that. It'd be awesome to see you there. But for now, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, it'd be great if you hit the like button, subscribe for more videos like this one, and I look forward to seeing you here next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters for helping me to keep going with these regular videos. I couldn't do this without you, and I appreciate your support so much. If you'd like to join the Patreon community, support the channel, get some great perks at the same time, there's a link down below in the description. It'll be awesome to see you there.